all part of the deal. Rex, hello.
Oh, good morning, Ray. I'm not very impressed with what's been going on in the Parliament, and I've been following this Christopher Pine business with Slipper and all the cast of characters that have been tied up in this from day one, or from when the public had a chance to get a look in on what was happening, and I could smell this about 100 miles out at sea where all this was heading. And all I knew at the end is it would be no good for the Australian public, it would be no good for Parliament. And if they want to have their filthy, dirty little secrets in government, Ray, and hide them away, we'll make sure they're hidden away, because once they get a smell of these things on the social networks and then into the courtrooms and then into the federal court, it could only end badly. And I'm particularly annoyed and at the Labor government, Gillard, and all the women connected with this so-called women's movement that created all this utter hypocrisy, because it's come back and the first test they had of saying, look, all of this is common sense and it's all fair income, it's turned out to be a total bloody fraud. And they've just made complete hypocrites of themselves. And although I'm not a lover of what some of the gay members of Parliament, both sides, have been up to, not a fan at all of any of this crap, but at least they didn't stoop to conning the entire Australian public with this so-called women's movement crap. And I'm sure there's decent women out there. Maybe it's Mrs. Abbott herself appears to be a straightforward woman, and I don't know if she belongs to the women's country cake movement or whatever, but I'd certainly be trusting those type of women than I would the ones that are running around with all this women's business all the time, which I honestly don't believe it's anything really to do with normal women at all. I think it's just a gay...
Well, look, Rex, you've had a fair say, and you've covered a fair bit of territory and attacked a few people, and we'll leave it there. You're getting a bit wound up about it. Let me just say this. I don't really care about people's sexual preferences. I'm unaffected by it. I've got quite a few friends that I regularly meet and greet and have cups of tea with, and their sexual orientation is of no concern to me if they're decent, fair people. Absolutely don't give a bugger. Don't give a bugger. I embrace them as friends because they're friends. However, yesterday, the women in the Labor Party who've been screaming the joint down about misogynist, about sexist, had an opportunity to vote in defiance of what Albanese wanted them to do. He's not a woman, he's a bloke. Over the absolutely disgraceful comments about women made by the Speaker of Parliament, Peter Slipper, in text messages between he and James Ashby. They had an opportunity to condemn him. Don't worry about the fact that it's sub judice. Don't worry about any of that. He'd admitted the text messages were his, written by him, owned by him. And the women in the Australian Labor Party yesterday, headed up by Nicola Roxon, Tanya Plibersek and others, and the Prime Minister, had a chance to show they were fair dinkum about their strong objections to men who don't give women a fair go. Men who treat women behind their backs as some sort of object of derision. They had that chance yesterday and they let themselves down badly by voting for Peter Slipper to remain as the Speaker because of some grubby deal done by Anthony Albanese in concert with Tony Windsor and Rob Oakeshott. Like Mr. Abbott, I've got a number of strong women in my life. I've got 3 daughters, I've got a wife. And if you think they'd let me get away in any way with the sort of behaviour that Peter Slipper gets away with via those text messages, you'd be sadly mistaken. And how he could stand up in Parliament last night and thank his long-suffering wife, how do you think she feels, his wife, in reading those text messages referring to women's genitalia in the fashion he refers to them? Now, like I said yesterday, I've knocked around all my life. I wasn't always a broadcaster with a significant audience. I've been an auctioneer. I drove cabs. I've called races. I've called sporting events all my life. I've knocked around racetracks, rugby league games, rugby union games, boxing matches. Boxing's probably the best indication, where there are princes and thieves and hoons and all sorts of people involved. I have never, ever, ever, ever heard a man in my company speak about female genitalia in the fashion described by Peter Slipper. I'm 58. I have never, ever heard a man talk about it in that fashion. I remember once I was working at Woolworths when I was still at school. I'd reckon it was about 1970. And there was this is long before social media, there was a piece of paper, a joke directed at women. Not quite as bad as Peter Slipper, but in the same vein. And I remember the manager of that Woolworths shop at Ermington finding out about this piece of paper circulated among young males in that store. And this is long before political correctness intervened. And he just said, look, boys, this is not the way you need to talk about women. You've got a mother, you've got sisters, I assume. This is not on. And those giggling boys that thought it was funny hung their heads and said, yes, sir, yes, sir. He said, so destroy all copies of this nonsense. I don't want to see it ever again. And I was horrified to think that my father or mother may have found out that I actually read what was being circulated in the warehouse at Woolworths at Ermington in about 1970. And we've come a long way since then. Over 40 years ago. And I really mean it sincerely, most sincerely. The type of stuff I read in yesterday's papers, the references to female genitalia by Peter Slipper, a supposed educated man, a parliamentarian, elevated to the position of Speaker, I've never seen the like of it. Never seen the like of it. Has he been condemned by Julia Gillard? Oh, there's been a little bit of, well, it was in poor taste and he's apologised for it. Then we had that silly woman who'll never be mentioned in this program again yesterday defending him, saying she didn't find the remarks on the text offensive. And yet, when the vote came to remove him as Speaker because of those hugely inappropriate text messages about female genitalia, all the women from the Labor Party who've been lining up to say, we're sick of the way men treat us, we're sick of not being given opportunities, despite the fact that a number of them are elevated to be ministers of the Crown and one's a Prime Minister, not one of them voted to censure him and remove him. That silly woman said yesterday on Twitter, and I won't mention her name here, is it really offensive to liken lady parts to seafood? I've seen plenty of reptile analogies for blokes. She then went on to say, completely inappropriate to send to a workmate. I don't think it's misogynist, though. I don't think it's misogynist. Well, there's only one place for that to go. It's called the shredder. And for those women yesterday, to have an opportunity to illustrate to Peter Slipper how disgusted they were, and then to vote to retain him as Speaker, collectively, hang your heads in absolute shame.